Welcome to Masterclass number 2. This is Dr. William Schimmel, and we covered a lot of ground yesterday. And we talked about the instrument as a built-in orchestra and how to use the left hand, the old way of using the left hand in a new sort of way, using the chords and the buttons instead of going oompa oompa. And that adds a new dimension to something very old, as simple as it may sound. So if you find yourself with an instrument that's not fully loaded, those limitations may work in your behalf. The accordion is the architecture of travel. It's the accordion taxi. And it's a paper in my book, Learning from Lawrence Welk. If you want a copy of it, you can contact me. You know where to reach me. And again, it's the instrument that takes you places. And it's something else also. It's an instrument of ironic duality. It rides the elements of beautiful, ugly, hip, square, elegant, vulgar, and it's never one without the other. And so it's the beauty of the instrument, and sometimes it's even the ugliness of the instrument. And so it rides those two dualities, and it's never one without the other. And so if you see one dimension of the accordion in a vulgar area, and you see it in a pure area somewhere else, I would say as a philosopher, it's not the complete accordion. The complete accordion is when they finally meet at the center, where you have the two dualities working together. And that's the accordion for me. Will Holzhauser has worked with me for many, many years. He's an important accordionist on the scene today, and he's going to give us a talk on improvisation. I like to say it's improvisation interpretation. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is Will Holzhauser.
Hi everyone, today I'm talking about improvisation as interpretation. Of course, there are many ways to interpret a piece of music. It can mean performing a set arrangement of notes and varying the dynamics, articulation, phrasing, tempo, etc. Or it can involve improvisation, spontaneously composing, coming up with new phrases, new notes, rhythms, textures, etc. as part of your interpretation of the piece. Some music involves improvisation and some doesn't, but it can be a really useful process or tool in developing an interpretation of a piece. So why do we improvise on music? What role does improvisation play in interpretation? It can do a lot of things. You can think of improvisation as serving different purposes. Expansion, that is allowing the materials of a piece to grow, developing them through variations, etc. Expression, bringing out certain feelings in the piece or within yourself, tapping into your subconscious. Exploration, bringing the piece to a new and unexpected place, allowing surprises to occur, maybe even mistakes that become interesting additions to the piece. Improvisation can help a lot with personalizing a piece of music, that is, accessing your own individual voice and style and introducing that into your interpretation. It can also be very useful in adapting a piece of music to your instrument, accordion or whatever else it might be. Improvisation can also help you create a connection with an audience in the moment, whether they're sitting and listening in a concert or whether they're dancing. Improvisation creates a moment that's never going to happen again, and the audience will be aware of that. As an example of all this, I'll show how I worked up an interpretation of an old hymn, The Lone Wild Bird. This is a hymn from the shape note tradition. Shape note hymns were published using differently shaped notes as a way of teaching people to read music. It was an early American hymn style that had many, many different influences that went into it. So today I'm describing my own approach to improvising on this particular piece of music. But of course, improvisation is so personal. Everyone who interprets music using improvisation has their own way of doing it. You may have your own way of doing it already. Here is the original 19th century shape note version of the tune, published in Walker's Southern Harmony. It's a cappella vocal music for group singing with 3 parts, soprano, tenor, and bass. And now here's an arrangement of the tune in a 20th century hymnal, which is where I first encountered it, and which is what I'm basing my interpretation on. So again, why improvise on this piece? Well, I love this hymn. It was one of my mom's favorites, and I wanted to perform it and share it with people. But playing it as is, straight from the hymn book, was not so interesting. It felt to me like a museum piece. That would work for the hymn's original purpose, that is, group singing in a church service, but to be a solo accordion piece, I felt that it needed something else. And I thought improvisation can help me with that. So here's what I was trying to do through improvisation. Expand the piece, as I said before. That is, let the piece do more of what it's already doing. Find a way for the material to grow into a more substantial experience rather than just repeating the written material several times. I wanted to add my own perspective for freshness and variety. I wanted to share what I find meaningful and moving about the piece, but to share it in a way that present-day ears can hear and appreciate. I wanted to connect it to other kinds of music. This song reminds me of songs from country music, bluegrass, blues, jazz. There are a lot of elements that are in common with various styles in this kind of music. And I think bringing in some of those familiar elements from other styles without being too cute about it can help us hear the piece in a new way. I wanted to adapt it to the accordion, of course. As I said before, shape note music is a cappella vocal music. The accordion is never used in that kind of music, so I thought it might be interesting to try it out on accordion. Some shape note singers say that the style is more fun to sing than it is to listen to. It's really not designed as concert music, as listening music. It's really a ritual group participation type of music. So another thing I wanted to do with this interpretation is present the style in a way that listeners can enjoy the unique features about it and the beauty of it, the saltiness of it, without the full texture of the a cappella group singing, which can sometimes be a little bit daunting. An important step towards leveraging improvisation in your interpretation is the arrangement. How do you set up the improvisation in an effective way? Will you have a certain structure to improvise on, or will it be free form? Which compositional elements of the piece do you keep, and which do you leave out? With The Lone Wild Bird, I use the bass line and chords from the more modern hymn book, giving credit to the arranger who wrote that version of the harmony. And then I thin them out a little so there's more room to improvise. I don't want it to be too dense. Here are a few ideas. I'm mostly using notes from the key of F, the F major pentatonic scale, and then chord tones from each chord. I'm trying to add a little variety and freshness by using some jazz harmony in certain places. This is not part of shape note style at all. I don't know if the shape note singers would like it, but this is part of my version. So for example, F major 7 in the first bar. And then sometimes landing on upper extensions like 7ths, 9ths, 11ths in some of the other chords like the minor chords. Adding some dissonance like seconds, clusters, fourths, and fifths. Adding occasional so-called wrong notes for a little saltier flavor, perhaps as passing tones between notes in the key. And then rhythm. In many ways, rhythm is the foundation for everything else. The piece is in 3/4 with straight eighth notes, so while I'm improvising on it, I'm reminded of other music that I'm interested in. Cajun waltzes, South American music that's in 3/4 or 6/8, blues or rock, orchestral music. So, we're all eclectic listeners these days in 2026. So improvisation can be a way to access those other things. And again, without trying to be too cute or too precious, it's interesting to bring in ideas from your whole experience when you improvise. And this is part of the expansion and transformation of the piece. What ideas do you want to bring in? So as you do that, keeping the improvisation related to the melody and structure of the piece maintains a certain unity. Or you can throw that out and go into a more abstract zone. The improvisation can relate to the piece in terms of energy, texture, and feeling without a specific structure. In all of these ways, improvisation can be a process for personalizing and adapting a piece. It's a way to make any piece of music work on any instrument. In our case, as accordionists, it's one way to play music that doesn't usually involve accordion. It's a way to connect with other musicians and with your listeners. And again, everyone can find their own way to do this. It's a way to bring your own individual voice, style, and interests to the interpretation of a piece of music. Many thanks to Bill, as always, for putting these seminars together, and thanks to everyone involved for your wisdom and your music. Please reach out if you have questions, and I look forward to seeing you all soon. Here's to another great year of the Accordion Seminars.
The accordion is the icon of the 21st century. It symbolizes past, it symbolizes present, and it symbolizes future. It can put you in memories of the past, and sometimes whether you experience them or not. And it can ground you, or it can do the opposite. It can just take you out there, and can be one of the most avant-garde instruments on the planet. So That's the accordion, the icon of the 21st century. This is Erica Mancini, and she's been working with me for many, many years as well. And she's made a name for herself. I think she's going back on the road with Gogo Bordello. And here she's playing all the instruments, and you'll see the Hammond Fun Machine, her accordions, and she'll scat sing. And here is Fiera de Mongeo. The accordion can be a bridge between harmonium, woodwinds, and bagpipe sounds. Of course, the bagpipes, of course, would be the drone, and the woodwinds, of course, would be the single notes in the right hand. And the harmonium sound, the sound that way back when they sat around and sang hymns by the fireplace. And you can actually do that in the right hand alone. Or add the left hand chords. Here again is Stephen Glutzbaum, and he will do I Dream of Jeannie, but first he'll talk about it, and then he'll play.
I Dream of Jeannie with the Light Brown Hair, written by Stephen Foster in 1854. Inspired by his estranged wife, the marriage was short-lived and the song was an attempt to win her back. Her real name was Jane McDowell. This parlor ballad became famous decades later. Not a massive hit upon first release, selling only 10,000 copies, the song earned him only $200. I dream of Janie with the light brown hair, born like a vapor on the summer air. I see her tripping where the bright streams play, happy as the daisies that dance on her way. Many were the wild notes her many voice would pour, many were the blithe birds that warble them all. I dream of Janie with the light brown hair, floating like a vapor on the soft summer air.
The Taxi Composer's Manifesto is a paper in my book, Learning from Lawrence Welk. We touched a little upon that. And it's again the whole notion of that the taxi is going to be the accordion, and the accordion is going to be the taxi. And today we might have to say the Lyft or the Uber, but when I wrote the article, taxi was the means of transport. And the whole point of the accordionist taxi, it takes you somewhere. It has a destination, and it's the destination of no destination. Because, in a sense, from a historical standpoint, we don't know where it's going. There's various kinds of histories on how it started, way back in the 2nd century. Then, of course, the Darrow brothers, Pietro and Guido, brought it to vaudeville, and it became a smash hit on vaudeville. And then it worked its way into accordion associations. And interestingly enough, I asked once one of the top members of one of the Accordionists Association is, why did you start this particular kind of organization? And they said to remove the notion of chaos. And I had said to them, I think chaos is kind of good for the instrument right now. It adds a kind of richness and it adds a kind of vitality to our playing. And it also allows us to think in a way that we normally don't think as performers, composers at the same time. Here's where the composer becomes the performer and the performer becomes the composer. And the listener listens along with us and we all take part in a three-way collaboration. Now, me as a performer and as a composer, there's a point now in my particular endeavors that you can't tell one from the other. My performances are my compositions, and my compositions are my performances. It was Otto Luning who told me that I'm doing today what Liszt and Busoni did back in the 19th century, only in a more contemporary way. And Otto Luning studied with Busoni. So that, ladies and gentlemen, is musical reality. And it keeps on moving. And you never know where you're going to end up. David Stoller and I go back many, many years. I taught him at a university, and I taught him at a conservatory, and we worked privately together. I want to surprise him because he doesn't know I'm doing this. He wrote a beautiful melody a number of years ago, which he called Melody. And I've been listening to Massenet, and I realized that some of the beautiful melodies of Massenet reminded me or put me in touch with that old melody that David Stoller brought in. And I decided I would, in a sense, do an arrangement of it. And I wanted to present that melody from different points of view. So this is called Melody from Different Points of View by David Stoller and arranged by me. the accordion has a homing pigeon dimension. If it goes away, it comes back. And I had mentioned before, there was a time when we all thought the accordion was going away. It only flew away for a time. And it then came back. And when did it come back? I really don't know, because it may have been happening somewhere else. For instance, if you were from Duluth, Minnesota, you can forget everything I said today, because it was always happening there. Everybody was dancing polkas, and they were going to polka masses in places like Duluth and those particular areas, the Dakotas. And perhaps we weren't paying attention. And whenever I went back then, remember the time you could read record jackets, spend an afternoon in a record store reading the jackets? Even as far back as the 60s, I would go into the contemporary music bin, and I would always find something like new music from Scandinavia, and there would be an accordion piece on there. And so it was there. And so it was always happening around and always seeming to come back. And then eventually in the 80s, I started to hear all this electronic stuff, synthesizers, and they were beginning to sound to me like accordions. And I knew something was kind of up. And I had this premonition that it actually would return in different sorts of ways that we perhaps were not expecting. And sure enough, it happened. And I got a call from Tom Waits, and he was putting together a band of acoustical instruments, not electronic instruments. As a matter of fact, he used amps that were tube amps because he wanted to get into that Luddite dimension. And there was that, and there was this MTV Unplugged, and all of a sudden Nirvana was there and playing Jesus Don't Want Me for a Sunbeam with an accordion player. And so all of a sudden it started coming back like a homing pigeon. And so this is what the accordion does. And a lot of times when it comes back, it may be near us, but we're not looking. It might be someplace hidden. It might be someplace existential. It might be an instrument imitating the accordion. It might be an instrument that looks like the accordion. And it might be a melodica. It might be something related to the accordion. So this is the homing pigeon dimension. And the accordion has it, and it always will be. It bounced from vaudeville into another dimension, and it bounced from the concert accordion dimension into the avant-garde dimension, and it bounced from the avant-garde dimension into the new age dimension, and it bounced back to us. And I'm going to talk about the bouncing factor later on, but there is a bounce dimension in the instrument. Jack DiBenedetto plays for us every year for constructive criticism. And this year he's doing the 1st of May by the Bee Gees. And my comment about it is it actually sounds like a harmonium that we just have been talking about, of course. But it needs two things, more flow and more rhythm. Now, how you do that, that is the puzzle. but it reminds me of a teacher back at Juilliard. He was the organ instructor. And apparently, according to the students, he only said one thing the entire time, and that was, let it flow, let it flow, let it flow. And so my advice to you is let it flow, and let the song give you the rhythms. And here is Jack de Benedetto, the 1st of May. The wow effect. You know, I've judged many a competition of all kinds. And a lot of times in the instructions to the judges, they'll come right out and say it, look for the wow effect. And I found out over the years that it pretty much means one thing, and that's, to knock them dead. And I mean, really knock them dead. A lot of dazzle. And so it also reminded me of an old Robert Klein HBO special I saw. And he said, if you go see a nightclub entertainer or a comedian, you know that they're bombing when they ask the audience to clap along. And they're like saying, clap along, everyone, I'm bombing. And what happens is, when a person is trained only to do the wow effect wherever they go, it may win a contest. But when you enter the real world of performance and concerts, you may have to do other things. You may have to learn to play softly. You may have to do shadings and subtleties and so forth. And a lot of times in the competitions, they're less interested in that. So, word to the wise, know the difference. I judged a contest recently, and to me, the wow effect was someone else. As a matter of fact, I brought someone else into what I thought would be the best person for that particular winning in this particular competition. But that person did not win because they were looking for a certain kind of wow effect. Now, in any kind of composition or contemporary music, again, the wow effect still prevails, but it has been changing lately. And for instance, a composer like Arvo Pärt, an Estonian composer, was writing at one time 12-tone music, and he was writing what was fashionable at the particular time. And apparently his wife took him aside and said, you know something? You really should be doing something else. She was very insightful. And she put him in touch with his Eastern Orthodox roots. And he developed this very, very, a kind of slow minimal style. And I thought minimal was on its last legs, but apparently it wasn't. It was just, again, like a homing pigeon showing up somewhere else in a new way. And so the wow effect took on an entirely different dimension. People were wowed by it. It was not, for the most part, loud. As a matter of fact, it was quite soft. And Arvo Pärt's most famous compositions are, of course, the cantus in memory of Benjamin Britten, and of course, Fratres. But here, the accordion quartet Bactopus is going to play Summa. The members are Robert Duncan, Mayumi Mioka, Gene Valonis, and Peter Flint. Summa by Arvo Pärt. I will now introduce Jean Valonis and Denise Konchelik, who collaborated on this particular video based upon a song by The Cure. And you might hear some Paul Simon in it as well. Many students come to me for traditional lessons including strict counterpoint. As a matter of fact, there's been a run of that lately. And so I don't just teach accordion, but here's what always happens. I would say 95% of the time, this happens. All of a sudden, we're doing our motets, we're doing our fugues and our madrigals, and all of a sudden, the student walks in the door and says to me, "Oh, by the way, I just bought an accordion. Here it is." And next thing you know, they become interested in the accordion. And so here I'm juxtaposing strict counterpoint with them becoming totally unglued with the instrument. And it seems that the the counterpoint gives them the grounding for them to totally flip out with the instrument. And so I suggest that if you're interested in a total sense of freedom with the instrument, is to get some grounding in that. And I don't care what grounding it is. If you're a painter and you want to get into the accordion, make sure you know something about painting theory so you can cross-reference that into the accordion. And whatever that is. Now, a number of years ago, I did an installation where I showed the accordion as a design device, where I showed it as a room divider, and I showed it where you can fry eggs on the grill, and I showed, I even said under the right circumstances, it can be used as a birth control device. And I even presented this at Microsoft because they were looking for people to come in and do right brain presentations. So take your discipline that you already know, ground yourself, and then go into the accordion the way you feel it needs to be. And it may not be just like the accordion books. It might be coming from some other place. And at the seminars, we look for that. But at the same time, many people from the seminars sat down in lessons with me and did harmony and did counterpoint and inventions, and then went off and had one hell of a great time. And thank you for joining us today. And we'll be back with a concert in a few minutes. Welcome to concert number 2. And Paul Stein, well, if you turn on the TV, if you turn on the news, if you might see Paul playing at rallies, protest rallies, or over the holidays, you may see Paul entertaining young kids. You may see Paul at a homeless shelter. And he does wonderful things in a humanitarian way. And here, the video you're going to see, he asked me to say something about it. And I'll actually read what he said. He said, on April 26, 2026, on the steps of the 42nd Street Library in Manhattan, Paul, that's Paul, had the honor and pleasure of accompanying a chorus of surviving victims of the U.S. bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and Japanese peace activists singing for the end of the horrors of atomic war. And the video is by Hideko Otaki. And so Paul actually went and accompanied them spontaneously. He didn't know what they're going to sing. So he did some good ear training here. Even though the melody he plays is unison, it was the first time he heard it, and he did a great job with it. So let's listen to the short video.
70年間これを歌い続けてきました。もっと広くもっと広く伝えたいと思って一生懸命歌います。聴いてください。それでは皆さん一緒に行きましょうか。こっち見てこっち見て。1、2、3、はい。ふるさとの町やかれ身寄りの骨埋めし焼け土に今は白い花咲く許すまじ原爆を見たび許すまじ原爆を我らの町にふるさとの海荒れて黒き雨喜びの日はなく今は船に人もなし許すまじ原爆を見たび許すまじ原爆を我らの海にふるさとの空重く黒き雲今日も大地覆い今は空に日もささず許すまじ原爆を見たび許すまじ原爆を我らの空に腹からの絶え間なき労働に築き上ぐ富と幸今はすべてついえさらん許すまじ原爆を見たび許すまじ原爆を世界の上にありがとうございます。
アコーディオンはポール・スタインさんでした。ありがとうございました。
Doug Makofka lives in Jim Thorpe, Pennsylvania, in the Lehigh Valley. And he's come to us over the years as a classical artist. And now you'll see him as a member of the Merry Hoopsters, a bluegrass band. Ladies and gentlemen, Doug Makofka and the Merry Hoopsters.
Rolling by, saying bye-bye. River rolling by, saying hi. Roll on, roll on, roll, roll saying high in the sky on the Lehigh, Lehigh, Lehigh. Big black vultures circling in the sky, hovering over me, wondering if I'm gonna die. With this banjo on my knee. Butterfly, flying by, flying by and by on a Lehigh, Lehigh, on the Lehigh. Married my girl on the riverside, up on a mountain so high, on the Lehigh, Lehigh, on the
At the Berlioz concert, there's a segment from Les Trions that's called For the Sax Horn, a predecessor to the modern day saxophone. And it's actually a blues. And so Erica Mancini and I turn it in to a Delta blues. Ladies and gentlemen, Erica Mancini. Will Holzhauser has written a work for his wife, Kathy Belden, and he calls the work 4KB, for Kathy Belden. Ladies and gentlemen, again, Will Holzhauser. Elliott Sharp, one of the key figures in the experimental scene, wrote for me a work, Evolution Is. I think you'll enjoy Carl Reel's video. And I can imagine what kind of salon he's playing in. And so here's Carl Reel's salon music. Sari Kalin took Blue Jay Way and decided to fly with it and created this video where she performs, she did the arrangements, and the cinematography, the camera, was by her husband, Mike Ricciuti. This is Please Don't Be Long, I'm Flying, Sari Kalin. Hugo Goldenzweig is a pianist, and we've been working together for many, many years as a duo. And I wrote a work called Sonata Unitarius. And I decided to make it a real dichotomy or an ironic duality. And I'm playing melodica. And the melodica is a little bit intrusive. So we're trying to create that sense of positive, negative. And you'll see how the melodica, which is invisible at the very beginning, might make a visit. So, ladies and gentlemen, Hugo Goldenzweig. Bob Goldberg, back again with another video. And this is called Incautious Midnight, Still Dreaming of a Better World. Here is a song called Mike's Laundry Song, written for our son, Michael Schimmel, and the words were by Rob Milrod. And the video has Rob there and has my wife, Micki, on keyboards, and his wife, Gail, and Mike on drums. And Mike loves laundry, but the song is about make sure that it's clean.
Oh, I didn't say it. Mike's laundry song.
Wear the socks, make your face all dirty and cheese. Well, I feel like dirty laundry gives me some kind of disease. I want laundry, clean socks again, time for the hair, throw them in. I want laundry, clean socks again, time for the hair, throw them in. Wear my favorite sweatshirt till it's still by itself. Throw it in the hamper, take a new one from the shelf. I want laundry, clean socks again, time for the hamper, throw them in. I want laundry, clean socks again, time for the hamper, throw them in. Stop, change your undies, hit the shower, wash your hair. Stop, wash those armpits, put on new shirt, put on some new underwear. Never feel like smiling, feeling like the steam is long. Then we're watching Heartland, partying it up and wrong. I want laundry, clean socks again, time for the hamper, throw them in. I want laundry, clean socks again, time for the hamper, throw them in. Stop, change your undies, hit the shower, wash your hair. Stop, wash those armpits, put on a shirt, put on some new underwear. I want laundry, clean socks again, time for the hamper, throw them in. I want laundry, clean socks again, time for the hamper, throw them in.
All right.
Stay in school.
Godfrey Nelson made a new video for this occasion, Evo Realm, and it features Godfrey on guitar, Lorraine Nelson Wolf on piano, Charlie Kotars on soprano sax, Ira Coleman on bass, and the performance of me is filmed by Micki Goodman.
something went away. It didn't go away. It went somewhere else. And like a homing pigeon, it came back. Maybe it will go away again. Maybe it never really went away. Maybe we weren't looking. Permanent transition. The journey with no end. Motion. 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 Motion.
Rita Davidson will play a work by Eugene Ettore, Agitato. And it's one of Mary Tokarski's favorite works, and she has passed away this year. And later on, Gene Willonis will do a tribute to her as well. But Rita Davidson will now play it in her honor.
But this piece is called Agitato, and I'm going to put my best effort.
Here is Mary Knapp's next installment, Interdite with Beats. And here is David Stoller, Theme for an Imaginary Evolution. And it features David Stoller on accordion, Hap Kufner on mandolin, and the video was by Pat Stoller. Thanks for joining us today, and see you tomorrow for day 3 of the Accordion Seminars. This is Dr. William Schimmel.
Thank you.